Good afternoon, everyone. Can you believe that we are halfway through October? Absolutely not. It's mind-blowing, and it's absolutely scary how time flies. I was just going through the news earlier this morning, and did you know that on this day, back in 1993, Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk won the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts to end apartheid in South Africa? That's 27 years ago. Another thing that happened this week, 10 years ago, was the 33 Chilean miners that were stuck in the San Jose mine, and they were raised to the surface of the earth. I think everyone survived on that day, and they were trapped down in the mine for 69 days. But can you believe that was 10 years ago? I think it just really puts things back into perspective, definitely considering that this is our 202 day of lockdown. So what an incredible journey it's been. But anyway, enough of a history lesson from my side. Let's turn to today's events. And we'll be discussing how to market and grow your healthcare practice ethically. Registering today, we've got 670 registrations, and there's 19 disciplines. I think it's one or two more than what we had last week. Let me share some of the numbers with you. Let's start at the bottom. I think there's a handful of doctors joining us today. We've got 10 chiropractors, there's 13 social workers, we've got 26 podiatrists and 26 optometrists. There's 3 hearing aid acousticians. We've got 6 psychometrists. There's 20 medical orthotists and prosthetists. We've got 46 registered counselors. There's 38 dietitians, 54 speech therapists and audiologists. Bios, you guys are 43. Occupational therapists, 65. Physio, just under 100 or 92. And 186 psychologists. So there's a big crowd joining us today, and a warm welcome to each and every one of you. The SpaceNet Global Group is sponsoring this 23rd webinar again today with the support of EZMed and Medici, a wonderful integrated practice management and telehealth solution. And again, we've managed to get it accredited for one ethical CEU. And I just want to thank my colleague Wendy from the Dux Academy of Healthcare that is always helping and supporting us in the background. Thank you, Wendy. Now, guys, you should know by now that all our webinars are recorded, and you can access all the recordings via 3 different platforms. If I can only find it, I'm going to share it with you. Give me 1 second. I'll post it in the chat functionality in just a second. That's on our website, ezmed.solutions. It's on our YouTube channel. There's a podcast, and there's a Spotify functionality as well, which you can go to. Now, talking about chat functionalities, I want you to use it this afternoon, please. Either the chat functionality or the question and answer functionality, and talk to us. We're very interested to hear your questions, and it's always just nice to hear from you, please. So guys, last week, we discussed the business of establishing a successful healthcare practice. But joining us today to unpack how to market and grow your practice, we've got 2 guest speakers. And I want to start by introducing Megan Maddox. Now, Megan is a successful podiatrist in private practice since 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And I think your career started back in Singapore. But on your return, I think you made a strategic decision to first join other podiatrists before you opened and established your own private practice in Johannesburg. Now, guys, something that you might not know about Megan is that she's got a degree in medical theatre too, and that she's busy with her master's in therapeutic science. Now, Megan, I know you're very passionate about the business of healthcare, and we're really grateful and delighted that you can share some of your insights with us and with our attendees this afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Just to clarify, my other degree is in musical theatre, and my master's is in sports and exercise medicine.
Or what did I say? Not musical theatre. I do apologize.
Medical theatre.
I'm making up degrees. I'm in musical theatre. Oh, goodness. Okay, had a little moment there. Thanks for clarifying, Megan.
Not a problem.
A familiar face on your screens is obviously Dion Beard, and as you can see, Dion is not sitting in his regular green office today. But Dion is still the director of the ProfNet Medical and the SpaceNet Global Group Executive for Operations. But I think more importantly for today, he has years of experience in running a successful private practice. Dion, thanks for being with this afternoon. But where are you?
Thanks, Lonnie. Hi, Megan. Great to have you with us. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us. Lonnie, yes, I'm actually on the KZN South Coast on my first day of holiday. My first panic was, where am I going to make sure I get good connection, secure power supply, and all of the rest? So the guys at Selborne Golf Estate Hotel and Spa were so kind to host me here. They said, as long as I order the coffee and drinks, I haven't had drinks yet, but the coffee is flowing. I'm welcome to use their boardroom. So a shout out to the Selborne Estate Hotel guys. It's really great to be here. But technology is amazing. Here we are, and we carry on as usual.
Absolutely fantastic. Thanks for joining us. I think everyone knows my name. My name is Lani Ace, and I'm a product manager with the SpaceNet Global Group, and I will be your host again this afternoon. Now, guys, I said it last week, but I just need to repeat myself again. Just a small disclosure. Please remember that both our guest speakers do have years of experience in private practice. I think Dion even presented his discipline, physiotherapy, at a society level. But during our discussion this afternoon, it's impossible for us to address all the little nuances and uniqueness about your practice. If you do need specific requirements, or do you have specific needs, please just engage with an advisor, preferably on a one-to-one basis. But I think we're going to try and cover as much as possible. We're going to try and answer as many of your questions as possible. And also just keep in mind, I think the majority of the attendees here are all registered with the HPCSA. But depending on which regulatory body you are registered with, just keep in mind that you need to follow their rules, guidelines, etc., etc. But the majority of the discussion today, we're going to use the HPCSA guidelines. But we should get started. And Dion, I'm actually going to look at your beautiful face this afternoon. I know you're a very old and a wise man. No, sorry, you're not old. Let me rephrase that. You're a wise man, and you've been in practice for many years. That's actually what I meant. And am I correct when I'm saying that if you look at the HPCSA guidelines, their rules, their regulations, that has literally changed over the past couple of years?
Yeah.
When it comes to ethical marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Lonnie, thanks for that. You were talking about history going back 10 years ago and then right back to 1993, I think you said. And yeah, history, I think very often in the marketing space, most of the healthcare practitioners I engage with, maybe 8 out of 10 of them, will reference back to a booklet 5 of the HPCSA, and which is again, back in the annals of history, and is not currently a booklet that is applicable. And that booklet has been withdrawn. You won't find booklet 5 anywhere on the HPCSA's website. And in fact, that has been replaced with other more focused booklets. Megan is very well versed in booklet 16 on social media and advertising using social media. So the HPCS has advanced as far as advising in other ways and modernizing how we approach this. But I think what's very important is that booklet 5 that many people reference, where the content was really around things like, if you put up a sign, I think many people can quote this, the sign has to be a one constant white light. I don't know if you remember that. That was the wording, constant white light, so it can't flash, it can't be a different color. It spoke about what your logos could be and anatomical representations and all sorts. It spoke about the size of your signboard as well, that it had to be 1.2 by, I forget what the dimensions were, nothing bigger than that. The good news is that is all past. It's out from that. It was within the booklet 5. Booklet 5 was guidelines. All the booklets are guidelines summarizing across using obviously the promulgated acts and the other legislative pieces of information to bring that together to guide us in what we should be doing and how to apply the regulation. That guideline's gone. So there's literally a 5-point check that you need to go through to make sure that you're advertising and marketing ethically. And we had a question from one of the delegates already that says, can I put up a billboard? And and that's the first. Well, let's check it across the 5 points. So I hope by the end of today, people can actually ask that question to themselves again and say, okay, in fact, maybe I can or maybe I can't. So let's let that one hang for a little bit. But yes, to the history is booklet 5. Let's be fresh. Let's look what's appropriate and applicable, and let's unpack that today.
Awesome. Now, Megan, I think Dion hopefully is not throwing you under the bus, but I'm sure you know booklet 16 a lot better. Perhaps you could just give us some of the headlines, and let's not go into detail at the moment, but what does booklet 16 say in the HPCSA guidelines?
Okay, so if I can summarize it in one sentence, it's basically just about be honest. So don't offer guarantees you can't keep. Don't put any flashy headlines there that make people feel fear that they have to come to you or that you are the only option to go to. and just be honest, really, that's it.
Does the booklet speak to digital marketing, social media, that sort of things? And obviously, if you just think of the word social media, that didn't even exist, let's say 10, 12 years ago.
So booklet 16 is the guidelines on social media. The title is social media, but the opening page describes it that it's not just social media as we know it. It's all electronic media, including email, SMS, electronic journals, and the traditional social media that we know, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, YouTube. It's everything that is electronic, basically. With that being said, it also references the telemedicine app. It does a telemedicine booklet. It does overlap there as well.
Okay, awesome. I think we need to unpack some of the content of that booklet, and we will do so later in this afternoon's webinar. But I want to start at the beginning. Megan, when we're talking about marketing and marketing your practice, who do you market to? Do you just market to your current patients, or is there a wider network that you can potentially reach with your marketing?
There are 3 areas to market to. The most important one is to new potential clients or patients. And that's an interesting one. They're all interesting. Number 2 is marketing to your existing client base. So you've already got your new patient, now it's with you. How do you keep them and how do you advertise to your existing marketing? And the third one that we forget about is marketing to your referral base, which is fun or interesting.
Do you want to elaborate on that a bit?
So marketing to your referrers is something we don't think of. And how do you do that is an interesting thing. We often get advised that, write a report. It's your best way of marketing to your referrers, which is great, but it's not always appropriate. I mean, if you've got someone sending you one patient once a year, one report once a year is not enough to remind them of who you are and what you do. And there are many ways to market to referrers as well.
Awesome. Dion, is that something that you're familiar with? And I mean, you were in private practice for a long time.
Sure. I think it is crucial. I think the communication channels going back to the doctor network that refers to you, your fellow healthcare practitioners that are referring patients to you is crucial. And I think where we often drop the ball is not closing the loop. So if I refer a patient as a physiotherapist to Megan and go, listen, I think there's some issues here on the biomechanics on the foot and the ankle that I'm not too sure about, have a look and let me know. I think this patient can benefit from an intervention from yourself. If I don't get the feedback back from her to say, this is the report, this is what we found, and this is what we suggested, and by the way, we think that physiotherapy might help in this element, can you take on? So closing that loop. And often when we look at referral networks, it's just about receiving those patients. So make sure the communication is going back, and keep your referral network updated about, other training that you might have done, that you've updated your skills, other interests that you've developed in your practice, new staff that have joined your practice that have a special interest in a specific sector that might unlock further and go, well, fantastic, I can refer those patients to you as well. So that two-way communication is critical. And I think that's, if you had to highly oversimplify marketing, it is really just communication and communicating to the right persons so that they know what you're about, and we can link the right patient with the right healthcare provider. That's really what we're trying to achieve here. And even social media, I think that's, again, oversimplifying that is really word of mouth. Again, we're talking about word of mouth, but before I had to walk to the corner and chat to a friend and share that with them. Now I can actually just pick up my cell phone and word of mouth share my experience of what it was to a much broader network. And that's just, that's what we always say. I depend on word of mouth. But with technology and advances, word of mouth has changed quite drastically, and also the reach of that word of mouth.
Absolutely. And I think it reaches, way beyond borders at this stage. And even with telehealth in place at the moment, you don't need to be in the same suburb or in the same city to talk to your patients and to actually consult with your patients, because you can use a telehealth platform. And you can do that quite successfully as well. Megan, I think you've got telehealth in your practice, don't you?
Yes, I do.
How did you market, or how did you tell your patients that you've got telehealth, or you're telehealth enabled?
So setting it all up was quite fun because I had lots of time during our COVID lockdown. So I actually did quite a big campaign with my telemarketing thing. And touching on marketing, an important process of it is planning and strategy. So it was a consistent putting out a message every day, every other day. And I did that over a number of platforms, but I also did a blog. I sent emails, Instagram, Facebook. But the email was interesting. And I sent an email to all my patients who have subscribed to my email database. We'll come back to that, saying this is what's happening. And I got some very interesting feedback. Most people never reply, and that's fine. You don't expect them to, but interesting feedback going, oh, okay, this is interesting. Oh, by the way, I'm an old lady in a retirement village. I'm scared to go out at the moment, but my toe is sore. Let's do a video. And that was my first telehealth, telemedicine interaction. Another thing for me is that I'm actually using it to service a clinic in the Northern Cape, which I haven't been able to go to since February. Yeah. So that's a phenomenal thing to bring into my practice. And keep in mind, I'm a physical discipline. So for me, it's an incredibly valuable part of my practice. It's not always practical. I can't clip toenails over a telehealth app, but I can still continue the relationship and the communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
The beautiful thing there, and we'll probably talk about that later in Facebook profiles as an example, but the beauty about keeping the relationship with the patient through a formal, professional channel, rather than, here's my cell phone number, phone me if you've ever got an issue, or WhatsApp me on my personal number. You've now got a telehealth platform and channel that you can engage professionally. You can actually say, these are my consulting hours. You can have downtime, and you can have your terms relating to what that interaction looks like, rather than crossing that boundary of personal versus practice or professional engagement. And I think that we've heard from many practitioners as a great advantage.
For sure, for sure. So telehealth is fairly new, and we know the HPCSA regulations changed quite recently to accommodate for that as well. But I want to take it a step back, and let's say you've got a fairly new practice, you just opened your doors, you need to get the message out that you are a specific healthcare practitioner, you do X, Y, and Z. Where do you start, Megan? Is it a website? Is it Google? Like, which platform do you turn to?
Okay, number one on the top of the list is Google, and that would be a Google account, or it's the platform is called Google My Business. So you start with the Google account, or you've got a Gmail account, and if you don't have one for your business, create one. So you actually don't need a website to have a Google My Business platform. You don't need a website to show up on a Google search. You need a Google account. So just think about when you Google a new restaurant you want to book at, or a new psychiatrist you want to go see, you Google. You look for where they are. Do they have a website? It's nice if they've got pictures of their practice or of the person. And then you read all the reviews and see how many stars they've got. And from there, you make a decision to either phone them directly or stalk them on their website. So step number 2 would be your website. And a website, you can start with a free website, but ideally you want your own domain, your own website, which is paid. It's not very expensive depending how you do it. And you want your own website for tracking and statistics so that you can monitor the return on investment. So from your Google ad or whatever, how much traffic is coming to your site. From there, the social media is an adjunct to that. So for me, number 1, Google My Business. Number 2, website.
Okay. And Dion, you've got a bit of a history with websites. How difficult is it to create your own website? Can anyone do it? Do you need a specialist? Do you need a marketing agency to do it for you?
It depends what your budget is and what you want to cover. I think many of the attendees are PropNet members. They know they've got a website, a MediWeb website, and as Megan is speaking of, that's the subdomain website. So there you've got Megan Maddox podiatrist.mediweb.co.za, and why we've done that is that allows us to put subdomains in place so we can host, manage, maintain those at no additional cost there. But if you want your specific website to be Maddox podiatrist.co.za.com, that's a specific URL, and then you need to be paying for that. You need to get your what we call your DNS entries registered. You need to manage, maintain, pay fees for that website. So that comes at a cost. And it depends what your budget is and what you're going to be getting. I know a lot of practices use WordPress, and it's quite an easy thing to learn to manage the content management side of it, to keep it up to date. But I think a serious consideration up front is one should be careful about starting a website if you're not going to be maintaining a website. I think very often people start and you have a look at this website and it's relevant and it's up to date and it's fresh. And within a year, that's starting to age already. Your information's not up to date. Your latest news has got a latest news that dates back to 2017. It creates a terrible impression. You're probably better off not having it. So be sure, we see a lot of people with great enthusiasm starting up websites, but if you're not going to manage the content of that website, keep it updated and relevant, then I'd probably recommend you either have a very basic website that basically says, this is who I am, this is where you can find me, and this is how you can contact me, and these are my special interests or what makes me different, and that's my focus of my practice. Keep it simple. But if you're going to go into stuff that can age, like latest news and updates, do that cautiously. Either do it yourself, make sure you allocate time to that because it does take time, or get a professional that's going to actually manage your content for you and keep that relevant and up to date. So I think that would just be a cautionary about that. We're all very flum and fear about our websites, but when you start visiting them, sometimes it's a little scary.
And make sure that the URL to your website works.
Yes.
There's nothing more annoying if you click on it and it's just error.
Exactly. And go and Google yourself. Go and Google yourself and see what comes up. Is your website coming up? Is your Google playlist coming up? And if you Google your name, but this is always interesting. I do it every now and again just for giggles. Google your name and see what comes up because it can be scary. So also, I mean, people often look at social media and websites saying, this can only be good. But when you open yourself up like that, you do open yourself up for positive feedback, but also negative feedback. And you can't then say, but no, hang on, this is now Facebook, but you can't be saying things like that, take it off. Because once you go public and you want to brag and you want it out there in the public, it can go both ways. So be careful about that as well. Make sure you're willing to take the good and the bad. And where patients do have a bad experience, it may happen, but please be proactive, address that immediately. Don't just try and make it go away or remove it. Just address that and be upfront about how you address that and what the challenges were. I think that people like honesty in those places. Yeah.
No, for sure. So Megan, I think when we spoke earlier this week, you mentioned the 3 Ps is very important in your practice. Do you want to tell the audience what your 3 Ps stand for and what that means for you?
Okay, so 3 Ps, the 3 Ps is about consent regarding patient content. So if there's something about a case that you think is going to be appealing to the world, you need consent. This is HPCSA, it's POPI, it's PIA, it's international laws, and it all needs to be in writing. So your consent needs to cover 3 Ps. The number 1 is people. So who are you, what are you, and who are you sharing the information about? So let's say people and patients. So you and your patient. How much information? Is it anonymous? Are there any identifiable features, etc.? The second P is place. Where are you sharing this information and to what extent? Is it just your website? Is it social media? Is it which platform? And well, can you secure it? Once it's out there, it's out there. Even if you delete it, it's still out there. And the third P is a purpose. Why are you sharing it? The POPI is particularly has a big emphasis on why are you sharing it. You can't just share it for the sake of sharing it. You've got to share it either for an educational purpose or a marketing purpose and say that. There's actually a 4th P, and it's all about, or the reason behind all of this, it's not just protecting your patient, but it's protecting yourself as well.
Sure, no, that makes a whole lot of sense.
Lonnie, I think just practically, I think what is always so important, I think it's wonderful. You've got signed, written, informed consent relating to utilizing patient photographs or the information or the outcome of the clinical intervention with the public. But the challenge here is that the patient can withdraw that consent at any point as well. And so, and equally so your staff. So from practical experience, we might be engaging with a stroke patient who's showed a good recovery and is really proud, and she wants you, please share this as far and wide as you can. Please, I'm so proud of what you guys have done for us. I'm happy. Take the photographs, do what you need to do. But you revisit that patient a year or 2 later, and they actually they don't even want to come back to the facility because it was kind of where that difficult time in their life was. They've moved on. They've gone back into the communities. They've been integrated again, and they don't want that reminder back. That's sometimes our experience. And now you've got this public image that's on a website, it's on brochures, it's on flyers, wherever it might be, that is a reminder. And they go, you know what, I did agree to it then, but I'm withdrawing consent now. or a staff member that is in the photographs as well, that is now no longer working for you, or left under a bit of a cloud. And they're going, listen, by the way, on the way out, can you please remove me from all your marketing material as well? And they've got the right to withdraw that consent. Now you've got 10,000 brochures you've just printed, and what are you going to do with those? So I really think that while there's value in that, and it makes it personal and all of the rest, I'm not sure if the risk outweighs that value. There are some incredible photographs that used to be very limited stock photographs. So you always knew that it came from a certain stock photograph group because everyone was using the same one. But it's definitely broadened up. There's free stuff. You can pay for it as well. I think I'd encourage you to pay for and purchase these because it really is professional. It's done well, and make sure you get something that's relevant for your space. And then you don't have these issues on consent. So that's your alternative option. Megan, you seem to...
No, I disagree with you.
Yeah.
I don't want to see a stock photo or the most beautiful foot in the world. I want to see real examples. So to me, depending, the benefit does outweigh the risk of putting stuff out there as long as it's covered. The problem is your patients are also happy to have you put their stuff out there until you put a double-sided A4 consent page in front of it. Because only then the reality of what you're doing actually hits and that there is risk, and then they say no. So you've already crossed that off. So that person who's read the consent and says yes is a safer option. So the consent is really important for them and you. In that consent needs to be, or the withdrawal needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be said, right, okay, if it's a printed media, fine, we can destroy the print media, that's fine, even though it's 10,000 brochures. But you must understand that if you withdraw this consent, we will delete the post, but it doesn't mean it's deleted from the rest of the world. So as much as you're going to counsel a patient on the risks and benefits of giving them local anesthetic, you need to counsel them on the risks or benefits of the consent of putting their big toenail on the internet.
Very true.
And I think also on that point, I mean, when we say broadly on the internet, I don't think patients always understand the impact of that. I had an experience where somebody said they're going to take a photograph, we're going to use it for marketing on the internet. That's great. But when they get a phone call from their nephew sitting in Australia saying, Omar, what a wonderful picture, I found you on the internet. And she goes, well, you mean all the way there? You've seen that there. I don't want that. And they withdraw that. So I think it's very important that we, in common language, easy to understand concepts, communicate this to our patients about what it means. To your third P, I think it was on place. Make sure they understand what you mean by the place, because it's not just a photograph going up on a banner that you're going to be pulling up in the practice. It might be a whole lot more than that, and they don't understand that how broad that actually becomes and how public that becomes.
Yeah, it doesn't say World Wide Web for no reason. Guys, so we've been talking a lot about consent, and I'm just picturing a consent form, but what's right at the top of your consent form is your practice name. And when you establish a practice, how do you determine what your practice name should be, Dion? What's the do's and don'ts around that, and as well as advertising it?
Sure. Now, my statement now is probably going to make a big handful of most certainly HPCSA registered practitioners slightly uncomfortable. But the HPCSA is very clear on the naming of practices. And I know it's not a similar kind of convention with the Allied HPCSA, for example, and others. But under the HPCSA, you may only use your name and surname, initials and surname or surname. And when you use your discipline, this is the kick. I think a lot of people have moved to that. So you can't say Rehab Rocks is your practice's name. I think that offends on many ways, and we'll talk this now about comparative advertising. But you can't call yourself that. It has to be, and I'm unfortunately got a surname that maybe doesn't roll off the tongue like Maddox does, but it's going to be Bush Physiotherapist. That's what you've got. That's my surname. That's what I can use. But what the emphasis, there's been a great move from using name and surname. But the other part is also important, and I think this was September 2018. The HPCSA, the Board of Physiotherapy, Podiatry and Biokinetics, put out an article in their e-bulletin that very specifically speaks to this. I can call myself Burrs Physiotherapist or physiotherapists, but I can't call myself Burrs Physiotherapy because I'm not the representative of the discipline as a whole. You've got the South African Society of Physiotherapy. That's for the profession, but my title is physiotherapist. And if I have more than one that's within my practice that are owners of that practice or shareholders in that practice, I can put an S at the end and say physiotherapists. Be careful about this one. We've helped practices set up practices, and the whole process ends at the BHF where you actually apply for your practice number. And the minute you put an S on the end, they say, thank you, Dion, for your signature, but where's the second signature? You go, what do you mean a second signature? He said, no, physiotherapists, there's more than one. So we need at least 2 signatures. And then you either have to go and change your name right back at CIPC, or you need to find yourself a partner to make sure that that is compliant. So just be sure that you pause and really consider the naming of your practice carefully before jumping into it. Otherwise, you start the process again.
And that needs to pull through to your website name as well.
The regulation around the naming of your website, I think the safest would be to follow that same convention. But let's unpack the other 5-6 points that we need to be careful of about that naming convention to make sure that it complies with that again.
Okay, all right. So Megan, what about the other principles? So we touched on a few here with regards to canvassing, touting. Let's drill down in them a little bit deeper. What's your thoughts around those?
These are always fun and have lots of debate. It's always interesting in the healthcare business how we can and can't advertise, because there's lots of things that we can do like other businesses, but there's lots of things that we are very, very restricted about. So I'm going to read to you the definition of touting and canvassing from Booklet 16 of the HPCSA guidelines on social media. So 9.3 is touting. Touting involves drawing attention to one's professional goods or services by offering guarantees or benefits that fall outside one's scope of practice. An example is advertising free Wi-Fi services to patients while waiting for their consultations. So no free stuff, no buy 2 get 1 free stuff.
Yeah.
Canvassing, and the definitions are distinct, but they are a little bit similar. So 9.4 is canvassing. Canvassing involves the promotion of one's professional goods and services by drawing attention to one's personal qualities, superior knowledge, quality of service, professional guarantees, or best practice. Now listen to the example, because here's a tricky one that even I've had to just learn. An example of canvassing is a healthcare practitioner declaring on social media or posting patient reviews that state he or she is the best healthcare practitioner in the country. So I might be the best, but I'm not allowed to say it. My patient is allowed to say it, but I'm not allowed to share it.
But they're allowed to share it on a Google ad review, for example?
Yes, so it's valuable being on a Google ad review because that's what we all look at when we're searching someone, but we can't take that and share it on social media. We can't actually clip that screen and share it. And I'll confess I've done it because I've just learned about this after really having a look into this. I just thought I couldn't say it, but no, we're actually not allowed to share it as well. Now, let's just cover one thing that I'm thinking about now. Asking for a testimonial is a slightly different thing because again, you've and correct me if I'm wrong, Dion, you've asked someone, they've agreed, there is a consent for them to put their words out there. Carry on that conversation for me, Dion.
Yeah, it is an interesting one, and I think your example is a brilliant one. That Booklet 16 most certainly does modernize some of the examples that bring this home for us. And it's that resharing, that retweeting, that boosting of that post for that somebody's actually declared that you are better than. And I think it's very important that, you know, testimonial that states, and it might be worthwhile you reading that canvassing definition again, because that latter part talks about saying that you're better than, or bringing undue attention to some of your qualifications. So again, it's about comparing you to your fellow practitioners and saying, you don't want to go there. You want to come to me for the following reasons. And I think we can all agree that very quickly goes into the unprofessional realm, because the next thing you find out, that patient was actually your sister or your brother, and you've kind of tried to incentivize them in some way to post that. So I think it's about keeping it, to your point, Megan, that you made earlier, is that let's keep it honest, let's keep it professional. There are other points that we'll cover soon, Lani, as well. But Megan, I think you controlling the URL and posting that testimonial, you take responsibility for that. And very often it is, John Smith stating the following about your services and stating you're the best in sliced cheese, I think would fall in a similar concerning category as you boosting that post on another platform, for example.
Okay, let's go back to the definition of boosting a post, because I saw there's a question about it. Technically, boosting a post on social media is a paid advert. It is different to resharing, retweeting, or putting someone else's stuff out there. So the question we got is, according to the HPCSA regulations, are we allowed to boost advertising on social media? Yes. If your content is correct and follow those guidelines, yes. But sharing someone's review saying you're the best in the world is not ethical.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think that's clear. And that gives great guideline. Absolutely.
Guys, but what about pricing? Can you put on a website or an advertisement or something like that, I am cheaper than the guy down the road? Or can you put your pricing on your website?
Okay, I've got my pricing on my website because I think it's important. It's part of my billing policy. My billing policy is on my website. But I say, these are my rates. This is how I charge, the end. Nowhere does it say I'm cheaper than this, I'm cheaper than that. Discovery, I've got an agreement with Discovery that it's not enticing. It is honest. That's the way I bill, the end.
Yeah.
You can't create, I can't find the word, you can't create a desire for someone to come and see you because you're the cheapest in the land. Also, it undermines the profession. It undermines your peers to say, this month, whatever this special month is, a biomechanical for 92 Rand. It undermines me. It undermines the whole profession. So pricing is tricky. Just be honest.
Yeah. I think I see there's a comment that came up in the chat. The inducement is maybe the one word we're looking for. Another word that I bring into this is bringing undue attention to pricing. I think that's important. And that's what we sometimes do in our marketing, or tempted to do, to say, in our marketing, your first treatment is free. Now, by stating that, the person's going to come to you because of the pricing element. You're bringing undue attention to pricing, which is why they're coming through, rather than saying, these are my services, this is my qualification, this is my special interest, and this is my focus for the practice, and they're making the choice based on that. They're making a choice based on price. Now, obviously, they need to understand their pricing. So, Megan, your point on informed financial consent is crucial. And it is important that when the patient comes in, they know must they bring their wallet along? Can they check that the medical aid is going to pay this? Are you part of a network or not? That means it will be covered. Are you charging the medical scheme rate that I'm a member of? Or are you charging your own rate and I must bring my wallet along and pay and hope to claim that back from the scheme? So it's very important that they make an informed financial decision. But that is quite different to using your financial decision as a lure and as the focal point on why people should come. So again, bringing undue attention to pricing in your marketing campaigns is unethical. And that is everything from, we'll offer you discount, we will do the following. You can offer patients discount, but that shouldn't be your core marketing campaign to say, come to me because I offer discount. And I think this also goes into some very tricky spaces around when practitioners, out of the goodness of their heart, want to do assessments in a school or, going through to say, let's first see if there's an auditory problem. But the question here is, you're going to do that, but when you're enticing that patient to now come to your practice because of what you've done there, that link is an inappropriate one. So where you are doing screening, you may do screening. There might be no cost. It might be a service to the community. But when you're done and you find something, firstly, make sure free screening doesn't mean you don't need informed consent, clinically informed consent from the process that's going to be followed, ensuring you involve the parents where you need to. But once you have your findings, it's then you need to go to a healthcare practitioner that will be able to assist you in the following findings. Not, now you must come to me. I gave you that for free. That's my hook. That's my lure. Now I'm going to lie this and you're going to now pay my fee. So let's be careful that we do it for the right intentions, and it's not part of the canvassing and touting approach.
Guys, so the word social media keeps coming up, and we spoke about your websites and we mentioned Facebook. But there are numerous other types of social media platforms. I'm just thinking of Twitter. There's WhatsApp. Just sending out an SMS. What about TikTok? There's a couple of random ones. Megan, in your experience, does those work for you? Have you used them? Do you want to use some of them?
Okay, so when I was building up my practice, I didn't know anything about this. I've done 1 or 2 paid social media ads and they were useless. But they were useless because they were random and unplanned. If they are part of a campaign and a strategized approach in your whole marketing plan, they can be effective. I'm yet to get there with my practice and my marketing. I'm still very much in the basic stages, or I'm starting to move into other things now. And also you've got to decide how many places are you marketing to, where are you marketing? For me, right now, video is much more effective than any of the other things. And video is not just YouTube. Video is all of those platforms. Another thing that people forget when it comes to social media is WhatsApp. WhatsApp is a social media, and it is an interesting one, and it is a very accessible one. Everyone has WhatsApp. Why aren't you using it to advertise or to market on? Status, profile picture, and we'll talk about WhatsApp Business as well.
Yeah.
So talk about it.
A point there, if I can just quickly, is who owns WhatsApp? And I think it's important that everybody knows.
They don't.
It hasn't been for always, but it's been purchased by
Facebook.
Facebook. It's a social media platform. So be careful. And those that are using WhatsApp for clinical interactions, conversations with patients sending photographs of what they're finding and so on, and using WhatsApp as a substitute for a professional, healthcare-focused telehealth engagement channel, I would say please be cautious. Make sure that you go in with your eyes wide open. But that's an aside. I think, Megan, you want to answer that other part?
Yeah, so WhatsApp Business is a separate app to WhatsApp. It's only about 2 years old, and I think it is one of the simplest and most powerful things in your business. If any of you Google my business, you'll see my number. Go and stalk my WhatsApp Business. It is a place, just a side note, that Booklet 16 emphasizes keeping your personal and your professional profiles separate. And that goes for WhatsApp as well. And the best thing, or the best reason behind that, is because all the business platforms come with business features, adverts, statistics, tracking, all these interesting things. And WhatsApp Business is interesting in that you can put catalogs in, you can label your conversations, you can put short codes, so you're not typing out the same 2,000 character text to the same person about their booking. You can just put a little code in. You can also then use the status updates to update, guys, here's my newest blog, here's the link. I'm talking about WhatsApp Business as a marketing tool, not as a clinical tool. That's been covered with all the telemed options. But WhatsApp Business is an interesting one, particularly if you use a cell phone and WhatsApp to make bookings, reminders, if you're not using an automated system. But it's a very interesting tool. Go and have a look at it.
Sure, and I think what's very important is everything needs to be separated, personal versus business. And I'm sure that comes down to even having a Twitter handle. You can have your own social one, but then you need a work one if you want to use that platform to market your practice and get out to the community and your different networks. Can I quickly throw a spanner in the works here and raise a poll to our attendees? We've got close to 500 people visiting us today. So guys, if you don't mind, I'm going to launch a poll quickly. And if you could perhaps just quickly indicate, and you can tick more than one, which platforms do you use for marketing your business or your practice? So we've got everything there, from my own website, Google My Business, Google Ads, Facebook, Instagram, there's Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, you name it. Give us an indication what you use. I'm going to let it roll for a few minutes so that you've got time to indicate, and then I'm going to share the results with you, because I think that might be quite interesting. Moving away from that, while the poll is actually running there in the background, what about internal marketing, if I can call it that? The staff working for you, the people answering the phone, you perhaps doing a follow-up call to your patient. Do you think that's important, Megan?
Absolutely. So internal marketing can have a few definitions. And I mentioned earlier things like emailing your existing patients. That's one form of email marketing. But phone etiquette, email etiquette, SMS, WhatsApp is incredibly important, and to keep that communication professional is incredibly important. So it's also very underrated. So think about how many times you found the most amazing website, you phoned them to make a booking, you asked a few questions, and you got the most useless answers. It completely defeats the whole experience, puts a downer on it, and getting that booking is so much harder. So if you are not answering your own phone, if you are not sending your own emails, if you're not on the WhatsApp line, you need to train whoever is there. Just like everything else, if something goes wrong and someone wants to complain, you as the Maddox, whatever, the practitioner, you are responsible. If you are the person answering that phone, you need to practice, and you need to be clear clear about your information going out there, and concise. People don't want to be on the phone forever, but there's always that guy. And the last thing is that you might have to give a little. So people are very appreciative of the fact of if you say to them, listen, I'm actually not the right person for you, go down the road. But if you to the physio, because maybe a podiatrist's not the right thing, but if you need me for an ingrown toenail, I'm here. They will remember that. So giving a little is always a good way of getting back. It's a long haul game, but it does help. It does work.
Yeah, for sure. Dion, I see you shaking your head as well.
Yeah, so I think it's also worthwhile, Megan read out the wording for canvassing and touting, but there's another element within the HPCSA regulation that I think is worth reading out because it speaks to this point, if I may.
Sure.
And it goes, a practitioner shall be allowed to advertise his or her services or permit, sanction, or acquiesce to such advertisement, provided that the advertisement is not unprofessional, untruthful, deceptive, or misleading, or causes consumers unwarranted anxiety that they may be suffering from any health condition. Now that really is the 5-point check that we spoke about earlier, and we can unpack a bit more detail later, but the point I want to bring attention to now is you allowing or permitting, sanctioning, or acquiescing to such advertisement. So that means if you're using a marketing company to do this advertising for you and put a marketing campaign together, you are responsible to ensure that they don't step over the line as far as the marketing approach. And in the same way, your own staff. So if your own staff are answering the phone and saying, best podiatrist in South Africa, good day, it's your responsibility to make sure that they are not answering that way. So they're not regulated by the HPCSA, but you are. And you sanctioning or acquiescing that they in fact do that on your behalf and are the face of your practice. So be careful. That is the first impression that patients get of your practice when they phone in. They've looked at your website, they've stalked you, they've done whatever they're going to be doing before they make their decision. They're going to be asking around. And when they make that call, they're going to go, I made a mistake, or this is good. And they haven't even spoken to you yet. So it really is important that you spend time on that and make that right. And then be sure that they're not contravening on any ethical regulations on representing your practice. And secondly, so important is that they also make sure that they understand the importance of protecting the patient's details and information, the patient's right to privacy. And so what we always did was we printed out the booklet on patients' information and protecting that. There's a booklet dedicated specifically to that. Give it to staff, even if they're not HPCSA registered, saying, read that at the end, you come back, ask questions. If you're happy, sign this to say that you understand that and you'll apply it appropriately, because you are responsible as a healthcare provider to make sure that they don't go home and say, you can't believe you came to the practice today.
Or the way that the receptionist or your practice manager answers the phone. Good morning. Oh, Mrs. Poffenpoel, it's you. How's your diabetic foot doing? Is the ulcer any smaller? And, oh, yeah, by the way, let's just update your address. And then you say that aloud over the phone as well. So it's,
and the whole reception area listens to that. Yeah.
Everyone listens to it. So, and you just literally gave away all that the patient's information, personal information. So,
exactly.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Megan, anything you want to add before I go to the polling results?
No.
Okay, guys, I'm going to stop the poll. Just give me a second. It's quite interesting. I'm going to share the results. Can everyone see that? Because it's actually the first time I'm sharing results.
We can see it. Very cool.
So my own website, we've got about 29 people or 29% that use that. Google My Business, 19%. Google Ads goes down to 7%. Facebook is quite a big one, 36%. Instagram also 13%. Hardly anyone using Twitter. LinkedIn, obviously a more professional site, on 23%. YouTube, only 2%. WhatsApp, it's big, 26%, but it's very interesting to note that 42% of people attending today or who voted, used the poll, is either doing absolutely nothing or they are using other ways and means that is not listed there. So definitely food for thought.
So can I share a personal story?
Please do.
This might hit home. I know the majority of our attendees are psychologists, so here's my story. I'm in the market for a psychologist, right? I have had a few names recommended to me. So of course, what do? I Google them. And they don't come up on a Google search, so I now really have to stalk them. So it's really tricky when you are looking for something, someone, even if you don't have any names recommended, and there's nothing out there. So when I search a psychologist, I get all the big centers that have lots of them, but I want to know who you are, what you specialize in, what techniques you use, so that I can make a connection before I even pick up the phone. So that says to me one of two things. well, it actually only says to me one thing. It says to me that you are so fully booked that you don't need my business. I want someone who's and I'm just going to be another sausage in the factory. I want someone who's got some information out there and who I can feel like I get to know before I walk through the door and is snot and trana and vulnerable as all hell. So I hope that hits home to some of the psychologists particularly, but everyone. The whole point of marketing is to get absolute strangers to know, like, and trust you before they even pick up the phone. No one cares about your qualifications. No one cares about how much extra stuff you've done. They want to know who the person is behind that, which is something to go and think about.
That's such a good point. That's such a good point. And people are becoming more and more empowered to actually do their research. You don't need a computer and fancy stuff. You pick out your phone and you quickly type it in there, and within seconds, you know, this person's got a footprint, number one. And they're out there, and you can see their LinkedIn profile. You can see that they also work at a university, their interests here and there, and you can even possibly find out a bit of personal information about where they live and they love mountain biking, whatever. And you're already starting to create a link with that individual. So you're absolutely right. I think it's about having a digital footprint.
I think there's also more and more patients who their doctor might have told them, I need to refer you to, let's just say, an allied therapist. And then that patient might not go to the person the doctor referred them to, and they're going to do their own research and actually find the person that suits them. So it is very important to have a presence on social media, I would say.
Yeah, but even if the doctor has mentioned it or someone has mentioned a particular name, I'm still going to stalk them and say, why that person? And you're still going to see all the competition and see if there's someone or someone better may come up. You're going to go back to your doctor and say, well, what about this? You might not even go back to your doctor. That other person might be more appealing. So referrals are a very interesting thing. And are they more or less powerful than your digital search? I don't know.
Don't know. I was in private practice even before websites, so.
Wow, now you're giving your age away. Lonnie, just a quick one. I do see there's just some questions just that I can kill quickly. Machadisa is just asking, where can you get the booklets? So the HPCSA website has got the booklets. You can do a search there to find those booklets. You can Google them, they'll come up. But make sure that you get the most recent ones. And then just on that the booklets, we've been speaking about booklet 16. For social media, it's ethical guidelines on social media. I'm just looking at the exact title, so you can add that to your Google search. And then the one on patient confidentiality is booklet 10. That's confidentiality, protecting and providing information. So go and have a look at those two guidelines from the Health Professions Council.
And they are readily available there, definitely.
They are readily available. You'll find them on their site. Yeah.
Guys, anything else that you want to share with us? What have we missed? What do we still need to cover? Because I'm just watching the time as well. Go for it.
So I think what's very important is we've zoomed in on HPCSA, and as you rightly said, Lonnie, in the introduction, let's be sure that we comply with our appropriate regulator within the healthcare space. So we know social workers have a different regulator, chiropractors, homeopaths, for example, have different regulators, pharmacists, different one again. So it's important that you consult that. We do know, and the reason we picked HPCSA is, we know it well, but also we recognize that it has a far-reaching impact. Even the allied HPCSA's regulations reference the HPCSA guidelines. So we feel we're addressing some of the high notes. But what's also important is to look at the other regulation in the market too. And the Consumer Protection Act, the CPA, also needs to be consulted and looked at. Now, the good news is, if I have to give a very high-level summary, is the regulation says whichever piece of legislation gives the patient the higher protection is the one that applies. HPCSA had its ethical rules and regulations out before CPA was created. And the good news is the HPCSA did a great job. They covered most of the high notes on that. What it doesn't cover, that the CPA does cover, is things like ensuring that there's unsubscribe buttons so patients can unsubscribe. They should also be able to list themselves in a preemptive block list, which I'm still waiting for the CPA to make public, where you'll actually say on that list, I never want to be contacted by an occupational therapist and a physiotherapist on any marketing material. So before you hit the send button and you got your bulk comms list ready, you need to go and see if Lonnie's actually on that list. And if she is, then I must remove her. So that preemptive block list, let's look out for that. I haven't seen that practically rolled out at this point as yet. But also so important is if the patient does hit the unsubscribe button. So firstly, obviously they have to consent to receiving news from your practice, and what that news would entail and which channels and for what purpose, all of those things that Megan covered. But if they change their minds at a point and say unsubscribe, you really need to make sure that you unsubscribe them and don't by accident keep them on a list, because you will be held accountable under the Consumer Protection Act regulation, never mind the HPCSA. And then also watch out for the POPI promulgations of those acts and the enactment of the regulation. We've got a year's grace period until October next year. But we have been assuming that it is in place, and let's continue to do that because that's the right thing that we do need to do. So make sure that you look at all legislation, not just your regulators' regulation around marketing.
Definitely. Megan, anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Oh no, so I just wanted to mention also the email marketing, but Dion has covered that.
Okay, yeah, especially with the unsubscribe button. Does the same go for an SMS campaign, Dion?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, make sure that you have that in place, and also make sure that whoever's carrying your SMS services, the carrier themselves, because patients can reply to a message saying stop, usually, where they will no longer receive that information. But make sure that, and that's usually automated, but also be sure that sometimes the trigger word is cancel. And a patient replies to you in their booking and says cancel, they want to cancel their appointment, and meantime they've now been unsubscribed from your list. So just be careful and make sure that those things are covered. But Lonnie, I think it is very important to just list the 5. I think we've been skirting around it, but if I may, just give the actual list of 5. And if anybody wants to take out a billboard next to a national highway proclaiming their practice, then I'll say check it against the following, and then you tell me if you still want to do it. The first one, is it misleading? Does it cause unwarranted anxiety or stress to the general public? And that's usually where you're raising certain symptoms and you're saying, are you feeling the following? You may be suffering from this following illness. You have to come and see a physiotherapist immediately. It's that creating anxiety to actually drive the patients, and that is not allowed. So it mustn't be misleading, cause unwarranted anxiety or stress. It cannot be canvassing or touting. You cannot draw improper attention to best prices offered, and you cannot claim to be superior to other services or denigrate other healthcare professionals. So if you can tick all those boxes with your billboard next to the highway, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's received from the public. And then the second thing is, if you ever have a question in your own mind about which route should I be following, I really would encourage us to consider advertising and marketing our profession first and foremost, and then possibly our practice. Okay. In other words, if you're going to do a brochure, brag about the value of podiatry in the management of the diabetic foot. And then say, small T's and C's. I am, by the way, a podiatrist. You can see me or go to the Podiatry Association's website to find your closest podiatrist to you. That is so professional. It's in the interest of the patient and it's driving the profession forwards. I'd really encourage us to lean and consider that strongly.
Brilliant. Thank you for that summary. We've got 3 minutes left, so I'm going to circle back to you both in just a second. I just quickly want to tell the attendees today that what our next webinar is going to be about in our 3 series, our little mini series of webinars. So based on last week's discussion, we were sort of talking about how to set up your practice, how to start your practice. You need to identify what your purpose is, the goals, your strategic plan, how to write your business plan. And obviously you need to do this within your regulatory bodies, whether it's HPCSA, Allied HPCSA, etc., etc. Now this afternoon, we've received some fantastic tips from both Megan and Dion on how to market your practice ethically and keep it sustainable. But, and I'm not trying to sound negative, in reality, practices close down for various reasons. It might be because of retirement, perhaps relocation, you might be closing your doors permanently or just selling your practice to someone else. What needs to be in place for you to successfully manage this transition? Trust me, there are certain things that you really need to think about, and you need to think about when you start setting up your practice. So join us next week. It's the 22nd of October. You can register on our website, EZMed.solutions, and we're going to teach and try and discuss, and I want to learn more about as well, the one thing that you probably don't think of when you're opening a practice, and that is how to close your practice. So go and register, and hopefully you can join us all. We would love to see you there again. 1 minute left. Megan, one piece of advice that you want to share with everyone today.
Be vulnerable. So tell your personal story. It's all about getting people to know, like, and trust you so that they pick up the phone. And once they're in your practice, then it's about reminders about who you are, what you do, so that when they have problem B, they don't hesitate about who to go to.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Megan, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate the time and effort that you put into this. Dion, a last thought from your side?
Yeah, thank you very much. Megan, thanks again. Thanks for the wonderful work you're doing in podiatry. It's really great to see your enthusiasm coming through and the work that you're doing. It really is exciting, and thanks so much for joining us. And yeah, I think I've given those tips. I think drive your profession, number one, and the value of the profession, and then the role that your practice can play in that, and make sure you check that list, the checklist, to make sure that you meet those criteria. And forget about that old booklet. Let's not be so conservative. Let's ensure that the Competitions Commissioner is proud about what we're doing. We need to be going out there and competing in a healthy, professional way, ensuring that the public and the patients get the best services available to them. So let's do it.
Awesome. Thank you, Dion. Thanks, Megan. I know marketing can be an absolutely daunting thing, and for a healthcare professional, it's not our core skill. They don't train it at university level. You need to go and look into it after you've qualified. But I want you to remember that your journey of 1,000 miles in your practice, it begins with one step. Take that step. Don't be scared. It might just pay off. Guys, have a wonderful evening. I hope to see you all next week. Take care, be safe, and bye.
Right.